Welcome back, everyone, to Weather Underground, a live look at four different cities in America right now. Chicago, Miami, Tampa, Charleston. What do they all have in common? Well, according to a new study, all vulnerable to flooding, but they're not alone. And whether it's small towns or large urban areas, the flooding can be devastating and massively expensive to recover from.
So how can we make our communities more resilient to future flooding? It's a huge question. One option might be retrofitting homes with floating foundations. Dr. Elizabeth English is the founder of the Buoyant Foundation Project. Let's start with just the logistics of this project, because I think a lot of people are interested in anything that could mitigate possible flooding to their home.
What works is that this configuration uses the water itself to lift the house. So a series of buoyancy elements, which might be one big tank or lots of smaller pieces that displace water, lift the house to make it float. And there is a vertical guidance system so that it won't float away. And when the flood comes, the house will lift up and on the buoyancy and float on top of the water and stay directly over its original foundation. And then as the flood recedes, it will go back down and end up exactly where it started off.
Okay, I've got all kinds of questions here. What's the advantage of a floating home over, say, a home that's built on stilts? And how do you manage for utilities like electricity, gas, water?
Okay, so advantage is, number one, it's a whole lot less expensive. Number two, you don't have to go up and down all of those stairs and be separated from the ground plane. And it's very difficult for elderly people and people with impaired mobility to get up and down to the houses on stilts. So this avoids those problems. It also doesn't impact the appearance of your neighborhood. Very little impact on the appearance of the house as well. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the cost. I think a lot of people go, wow, this sounds interesting, but it has to be crazy expensive. How inexpensive is it to do?
Well, I mostly work on retrofit, and retrofits are about a third of the cost of permanent static elevation.
Now, I know you've had, you thought about doing a project like this in the United States, but you've run into some issues with FEMA. Is there any opportunity for this in the United States for some of our flood-prone communities or maybe our coastal communities that are at risk for hurricanes?
Yes, new built amphibious housing is not allowed, or it's very difficult. But retrofit, under most circumstances, a house can be retrofitted to be amphibious without running afoul of FEMA regulations. It just has to be an older house, and the retrofit needs to cost less than 50% of the value of the house. Also, I didn't answer the question about utilities. So there are any number of ways that the utilities can be handled, either with flexible lines or with self-sealing breakaway, or these types of connections that have all been developed in the marine industry. So we can take them off the shelf.
Are there any types of homes or any particular areas of the country where it's a little bit more challenging to do this?
Well, we need, at this stage of the early development of the technology, we're trying to avoid any place that has very fast flowing water or waves. So if you're in a coastal area, you want to be a little ways back in from the shore to where the waves have dissipated and the water isn't coming in too fast. So it's not a good solution for for flash floods either. But anywhere where the water is rising gradually rather than flowing fast is likely to be a good location for this.
I know you're doing all kinds of research on these homes. Is there a specific type of home that's best for this? Could you do a two-story home? Could you do a home, say, that was brick? Is there a weight limit to this?
There's not a weight limit, but the heavier the house is, the deeper or wider the buoyant foundation needs to be to displace enough water to lift the house. So right now, as I said, we're in the early stages of developing this technology. So we're trying to use lightweight which mostly means wooden houses with a simple structural system so that it's easy for us to place the buoyancy in the places where it needs to hold up the house.
Well, Dr. Elizabeth English, we thank you so much for your time, for your insight, and all the answers this evening.